Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today I am doing another review. Today it's the review of the quarter finals, and for these reviews I'm going to be doing, for the knockouts anyway, I'm going to be doing a review for each game separately. So we're going to do the first one today, which was England versus Australia. So let's get straight into it. Now this game was looking to be an absolute cracker between England and Australia. Of course, a lot of history between these two. They're very big rivals. Australia, of course, the last time they actually beat England was in 2015 in the World Cup, knocking England out of their own World Cup. But ever since then, they haven't beaten England. Under Eddie Jones, England have won every single game, and that continued into this World Cup as England romped home to a brilliant 40 points to 16 win over the Wallabies. And really, they were brilliant, to be honest, England. I was thinking that the 2-week gap due to the typhoon could have been a bad thing, as they may not have been firing on all cylinders, and they got through their first 3 games quite simply without really showing much of what they're about. But today they were outstanding, and Australia, they were good in parts of the game, but they didn't really seem to get when they had momentum, they didn't seem to keep it very well. And England are the team who are brilliant with keeping momentum. They know how to keep momentum, they keep it with them, and they are also brilliant at keeping themselves in the lead. They know how to defend a lead, and they showed it again today. They had to show pure resilience today, the English. First half, it was, to me, I think Australia played very well in that first half. They should have taken more out of it. Of course, they went 3-0 up, but they should have taken more out of that first half than they did, only taking penalties out of it. With Johnny May scoring 2 tries. It was just clinical from England, and Australia were making mistakes that led to these England tries, and that was kind of the story of the game, not just the first half, the story of the game. Australia were making silly errors and giving away the ball, and England just pounced and scored the tries off them, and that's what they did, and they got into the lead. And as I see it, England know how to defend a lead, and they did that, and they did it well, because they got that in the first half. They had the momentum going into half time, and then of course the start of the second half is the best way to take momentum off the team who has the momentum, of course, because you had the 15-minute break. One team could be more fired up than the other, and the Aussies were definitely fired up coming out at half time. They scored a try almost immediately through Beatty. It was a brilliant try from the Aussies, brilliant stuff, and they looked like they were coming back into the game. They looked like they were having that momentum. It looked like it was theirs, and it looked like that they were coming back to give England another World Cup nightmare. But then they just didn't set very well on the restart. They just lost the ball from the restart, gave England easy possession. From a restart, from you scoring points, you want to keep the ball, you want to kick it back to them, get some territory, but they just gave England easy ball, and England know how to pounce on errors, and they can score from other teams' errors, and they did that. And as soon as they got the ball, it was their time, and they had to score, I felt, in that motion, and they did, and it was Kyle Sinclair. It was a brilliant try, lovely pass when Farrell set Sinclair through, and he scored a try, and it was pretty much straight from kickoff, from after Australia scored their own try, and that's where I think the game was lost for Australia. They got the momentum, they had the momentum, it was looking like it was swinging, but then an error from kickoff and being safe from them ended up giving England the ball and them scoring a try. And that's when England got back the momentum, managed to stretch their lead, as they did end up 1 point ahead when Australia scored. So they managed to stretch their lead, get the momentum back on their side, and for the rest of the game they just didn't allow Australia to get the momentum. It was a bit of a slugfest during parts of that second half when Australia were about 8 points down, and then of course they went 11 points down for a penalty. By the way, Farrell was brilliant in this game. He was amazing. Best performance from him in a World Cup. Really put away his doubters after a couple of poor performances. He kicked over his points. He put them 11 points in front. And from then on, England just kept momentum. They just didn't allow Australia to have a foothold in the game. And from then on, they kept on going. They kept on charging every time they had the ball. It looked like they were going to create something, and they were stopping Australia's attack, and they were playing well. They were controlling the game brilliantly, and it's a good sign going forward that you can control such a pressure game in such a pressure environment with loud noises from the fans. It's brilliant to see that they can control a game in that sort of situation, because it will bode well if they get to the final, and it will bode well in the semi-finals as well. So that was good from England. And from then on in the second half, due to the fact they weren't giving Australia a foothold, they just kept on pushing them back, and they scored a couple of tries. And once they got a big enough buffer, once they got a big buffer, 14 points plus that buffer, that was when Australia really started losing it. They had to throw the kitchen sink because it started getting a bit late into the game and Australia was still there or thereabouts, and so they had to start throwing practically the kitchen sink at the England defence. And because they were trying things that were a bit risky, they weren't coming off, and the interception from Watson at the end is a prime example of that, because Australia, they were just trying things that wouldn't work, a long looping pass, and Watson read it brilliantly. And it's those sort of things that didn't help Australia, the sort of forcing stuff that doesn't need to be forced. If you're behind, you need to just stay calm, stay controlled, do the basics well, and Australia didn't do that. They lost it there, and they were trying things that weren't coming off, and England won the game through that really, and they ran away with it in the end in those last 10 minutes. I do think the scoreboard says more in England's favour, because I think it was much closer than it looks, but that's only because Australia were trying so hard to attack that they made errors, they made handling errors that gifted the ball back to England, and then they just pounced on the errors and scored tries from it. So yeah, that's really where that big scoreline comes from. I think it would have been much closer if England didn't score those penalties, but they did, and yeah, so in the end, England won. They won well, and fully deserved, because they were outstanding. They were outstanding in every facet. I even think that they beat Australia at their own game, which is the rucking game. I think Underhill and Curry, who was man of the match, were brilliant. They were amazing in this game. They, I think they got more turnovers than Pocock and Hooper did, and that's quite rare, because Pocock and Hooper are probably two of the best ruckers in the world, and Curry and Underhill really stood up against a tough flanking Australian team, and that really helped England go forward as well on the turnover ball and counter-attacking. Of course, it's where England base their attack off, and England were outstanding in pretty much every part of the game, and it's looking good going into the semi-finals, and if they make the final as well, because it shows that they are all round. They have good players everywhere. They have good depth as well, so when players come off the bench they can finish games off, and their overall game is brilliant, and it's good because that's useful in these knockout stages. And England are cooking on gas at the moment, firing on all cylinders, and they are looking like a tough prospect now for the semi-finals. And for Australia, however, I think this is their peak. I didn't think that they'd make it past the quarters. I don't think their team was good enough, and the amount of squad rotation that they were doing throughout their World Cup, it doesn't help. They didn't have much consistency in their World Cup selection when other teams did, and it kind of showed throughout this World Cup. And in the end, I think this is as far as most people thought Australia would go. Of course, they do usually turn up at World Cups, but they haven't been amazing in this World Cup. But I'm assured that they'll probably be there or thereabouts in the next 4 years, and come France, so they'll be back again. But it's not a great World Cup for them, and this result probably means Cheika will leave at the end. But you know, I don't think they were good enough on the day. Better team won. England won straight out, and they progressed through to the semi-finals. England. Sad to see Pocock leave on a bad note, on such a big loss, but that can easily happen in World Cups when you call your retirement to be a World Cup game. You know, you could leave on a sad note in the World Cup quarters or the pool stages, or you could leave on a high in a World Cup final. It just depends. But yeah, overall, the better team won on the day. England are looking very good for the semi-finals now, and they are firing on all cylinders going into that semi-final, while Australia, they were brilliant in parts during this World Cup, but for me, I think the quarterfinals is as best as they could have done, and they may not be proud of how their World Cup's gone, but I'm pretty sure that they'll be back in France in 2023. So that is my review of Australia versus England. Thank you all for watching. Please give a like and a subscribe. Put down in the comments below what your thoughts on the game were. And yeah, thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in a bit for the next quarter-final review, which will be New Zealand versus Ireland. See you in a bit.